Thirdly, let me ask you this question. Parents, specifically, grandparents, great-grandparents, are you pounding on the doors of heaven for your children? Notice that this woman does eventually say, Lord, help me. That's what Matthew says. But why is she there? Why is she pounding on Jesus, as it were? It's for her daughter. Christ is teaching us here to pound on the doors of heaven for our children. It's reminiscent, isn't it, of that parable that Jesus tells of the unjust judge who was constantly bombarded by this person for justice and finally relents and gives in. You get the sense here that Jesus, now of course we know in his divine plan that he was just setting a proper context so that the woman's faith would be strengthened. But in a sense, Jesus is overwhelmed by this woman's persistence for her daughter. Are we pounding on the doors of heaven for our children? Parents, please place no confidence, relatively speaking, in your parenting techniques, in the fact that your children grew up in church. God forbid we put our confidence in that. Pound on the doors of heaven for your children. And I would encourage you to do this at least every single day. We have the practice of, when we tuck our children into bed, to pray for them, of course, and so that they can hear that they shouldn't be scared at night, and that God would protect them from bad dreams and so forth. But we're not just praying to our children. We're praying to the Lord, and we're pounding on the doors of heaven, praying every day that God would be a God to them, that God would see them through all the way through this valley of tears, and to be a God to them forever. And we do this repeatedly. And in fact, friends, I would urge you not only to pound the doors of heaven repeatedly for your children, or for your unbelieving brothers or sisters or parents or neighbors, but to do so boldly. Notice how this woman is almost wrenching Jesus' arm, but doing so on the basis of his own mercy. When he gave her that foothold, that first I come to the children of Israel, and Jesus and the woman is essentially wrestling with God, wrestling with Jesus. Be bold in your prayers. Sometimes we do this on behalf of our children. I would commend this to you as well. The old Puritan and Scottish divines used to talk about suing God, suing Him on the basis of His own promises, on the basis of the grounds that He has set. So we would say something like this: Lord, you have made promises. Will you not fulfill your promise? Right? That sounds kind of bold, doesn't it? But God is blessed to have His own promises thrown back in His face, as it were. Isn't that what some of the saints in the Old Testament did, and particularly Moses, and others, when God was about to wipe out His people? Moses said, "Will you do this before the Gentiles? Will you turn your back on your promises that you've made?" Moses almost says, God, you can't do that. Of course, he says so from a perspective of faith and with reverence, understanding that God is free in His decrees and in the administration of His decrees. But we would do well to say to the Lord, Lord, will your covenant fall flat in this generation? Will you not be a God to our children as well? You see this wrestling with God on the basis of His own word. Pound on the doors of heaven for your children.